I don't understand what the purpose of this revisionism is outside of Nazi apologia.
Revisionism.
Here,
These are basic facts.
let's move to the current day. We're racing ahead.
People toss around when they can't reckon with the actual record.
We're racing ahead 80 years. We're racing ahead 80 years, okay? So Russia invades Ukraine. I think it's bad that they did.
How did Michael Tracey think this was like a good idea? This was his idea. He proposed to do this. Like, I feel like people are going to accuse this of being low-hanging fruit at a certain point. It's like, Michael, this is ridiculous. Vaush is debating Tracey right now. Okay, I'll take a quick. Oh, I was just about to do the Jones segment though. Okay, just one peek. I want a little crumb. I want to see if he's really mad.
Debates, and one reason why I'm rejecting that this notion of World War II as this paradigmatic example of absolute goodness as relates to U.S. military intervention. There are a couple reasons. A huge one.
Oh my God, is he defending his fucking World War II takes? Is that what this is about? You know what's funny about Michael Tracey? He could have, if he just did a little rewind, he easily could have said something to the effect of, did you know that Hitler was partly inspired by the genocide of Native Americans in America, and it was one of his inspirations for elements of the Holocaust? That is a factual statement right there. You could have said that. Not that America was responsible for the Holocaust. That is so different and so weird. It's like American exceptionalism to the extreme, where America was doing the work of the Nazis. No, the Nazis did the Holocaust. You don't need to lay that one on the ground of Americans. It's like, and there's so many fucked up things America has done. That's the other part of this I don't understand. You have a world of fucking atrocities, war crimes, genocide, shit like that. You have so much stuff that you can pin on America. The Holocaust isn't one of them.
And I'm sort of curious what you think about this, and we can sort of connect it to what's going on now. A huge one is there was a genuine, indisputable, even people who are ardently pro-Roosevelt, even people who are ardently pro-intervention, meaning they were agitating for the U.S. to intervene militarily in World War II contemporaneously and afterwards. There's basically universal acceptance that there was a massive campaign of state deception undertaken by the Roosevelt administration, by the military brass, even to some extent by the Congress, to conceal from the public the true nature of U.S. military intervention well before Pearl Harbor. So well before the point at which most people just kind of popularly assume the U.S. entered the war, right? So the U.S. enacted this massive arms provision.
Can you make him stop gish galloping and just stick to one quick point or soundbite? Like, I want to know if he's defending that take, then like immediately you'd have to straight up be like, this is pretty simple, Michael. I don't know what part of, the whole America did the Holocaust stuff you want to start with. I don't. We could probably take one little piece and extrapolate it. I mean, it's quite a take.
Vision program, Lend-Lease, that's by the way been revived as of this past April.
Which I agree with, which I'm fine with.
Okay, yeah. And Lend-Lease was sold to a war-wary public because remember, World War I was largely considered on a bipartisan basis,
Michael,
to have been a disaster. I'm getting to the point.
We're talking.
Yeah, it's about time, Michael. Michael, concentrate, Michael. What are you doing here, Michael? Come on, you gotta rein it in, Michael.
No, but what is the point going to be a yes/no answer to the question?
The point is that given that massive campaign of state deception that was fundamental to the means by which the U.S. entered the.
Of course, Michael Tracey is one of those motherfuckers who likes, I gotta give them a name, maybe the crumb of truth. That's what I'll call them. The entire genre of like pseudo-intellectuals who will be like, okay, I figured out a few things, crumbs, if you will, of truth about the history of the United States and it being bad and doing bad things. And then you're like, okay, yeah, those are factually accurate. Okay, well, I'm now going to use the crumb of truth to make this next thing true. The USA did the Holocaust. It's like, oh no, see, that's not real. You can't do that. You can't be like, I'm going to say some things that are factual about the history of the United States, okay? And that's why the current thing I'm trying to pass off is right. Like it's not how you do this thing.
War. I'm saying that fact means that a binary yes or no answer. That fact explains or helps explain.
The last time Vaush spoke to Michael Tracey, he predicted Tulsi would leave the Dems, and he was right. To be fair, everyone did. Like, I did. Like, I think the writing was so heavily on the wall. It was just like, why are you in the Democratic Party? That's the only thing that doesn't make sense. Everything else tracks. Like, everything makes sense. You're into gender ideology, and you want to take trans people out of certain sports teams, and you want to check out the genitals of trans kids and all those kind of stuff. It's like, okay, so yeah, this sounds very Republican of you. This is interesting. Kind of the libertarian angle where she's like, I'm not war hawkish, even though I will disappear for a little while as a politician and suddenly just do a tour of duty and then come back and be like, check out these pictures of me. Yeah, I was a soldier for a couple months and I'm back now. It's like, doing what? You wouldn't even tell us where you were. You were just like some country in Africa. That's weird, right? This like, I don't know why you're in this political party.
Well, I'm not willing to say just a flat yes to your question to me, because that would necessitate saying that yes, it's just absolutely morally good for the government to undertake an extensive, protracted campaign
Michael,
to bring a country to war. And I don't tend to endorse
that.
Michael,
no, it isn't. You
yes,
can say, I think it's good that we intervened, but I disagree with some things we did. You can say, overall, I think our intervention in World War II was a good thing, but I don't agree with all the behaviors our government engaged in. That is not only is that a reasonable position to take, it's mine, but also it's like the way a normal person would think about it. Nobody would think, because I agree with the U.S. intervening in World War II, I'm therefore endorsing every single thing the government did over that time
just
period.
Curiosity, though. I mean, just stipulating that I'm basically right in explaining this deception campaign, and you don't have to take my word for it.
Nobody here is talking about a deception campaign. We're talking about whether the intervention was justified.
How do you view that in moral terms?
I'm talking about the intervention as a whole.
No, but the state deception.
No.
How do you view that?
Wait, Michael. Yeah. We're talking about the moral value of intervening to fight the Nazis.
The moral value of state deception to bring a country into war.
Wait, bring a country into war?
Intervention in World War II.
Whoa, I'm sorry. Do you think the U.S. started the war?
No. Here's what I'm saying.
But you're doing it right now. So this right here. Wait, Michael. This is why, because I called you a weasel the last time we talked, and nothing has really changed. You deny. Wait. You deny the parallel between the World War II intervention and today, but what you're trying to do is imply that parallel. What you're doing right now is going like, well, how can we really say intervention is good or not when there's all this deception behind the line?
Hold on a second. I'm not denying that any parallel could reasonably be drawn. There actually are some potentially plausible parallels. The parallel or the analogy that I am rejecting is the importation of the moral valence of U.S. intervention into World War II, as though it's just this paradigmatic example of absolute goodness into present day. That's what
nobody is talking about.
So, Michael,
you're doing it again. Nobody is talking about intervention in World War II as a paradigmatic virtue of moral goodness. We're just talking about whether it is. I am talking about whether it was good.
I totally forgot Michael Tracey talks like this too. So I moderated a debate between Michael Tracey and Ben Burgess way back in the day, and like I think he was so unhappy with that. Like he started like cutting off contact with me and being really weird. I don't know. It was just strange. He's just a weird dude. He's really bizarre. But like he also speaks in this fucking arrogant, such a fucking arrogant, like. If I use probably the fourth or fifth word in the thesaurus for this other word, maybe every 2 or 3 words, I'm going to sound way more intelligent than I am, and my takes will be respected more by my peers. Like, that's the idea. And it's like, it does not hide it. Like, you can't mask it. You can't mask your really shitty takes with just like, oh, complicated language, you see.
generally, or bad generally, that if you could flip the on-off switch on US military intervention in World War II, would the world be better if we hadn't done it? Not was everything...
People that talk fancy to try and seem smart, absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong, I know I use sometimes big words or larger words than like the average person is like, oh, what does that mean kind of thing for some things I'm talking about. But like, I think there's a difference between just using language that you think is the best possible word for that moment, and people who just use it intentionally to mask the rest of how they speak. Like every third or fourth word is like, yes, paradoxically, this will be as pragmatic as the serendipitousness of my concurrent trajectory, you know, and then you're like, I mean, sure, my dude.
I did during it.
Emphasize the point that I was trying to get you to address respectfully, which is that, I mean, how do you feel? Let's say that you believe...
I don't know enough about the specifics.
How do you view the state deception that was integral in bringing U.S. intervention into World War II about?
I don't know the specifics of what you're referring to, and I don't have a reason to trust your characterization of it.
Okay, I mean, it's all totally mainstream literature.
That's fine. I mean, I'm glad we went and fought the Nazis. Even if the government lied, I'm glad we went and fought the Nazis. Even if the government lied. Well, if then the government, if the government lied.
That's where you and I differ. Because if the government lies, or, you know, I don't even use the word lie because it's sort of excessively...
So wait, the government lies, so you should let the Nazis win?
If the government undertakes a sprawling campaign of deception to bring a country or bring the United States into a war, entry into which, by the way, was largely opposed.
But they declared war on us.
And then I'm not willing to just give a yes or no, you know, binary, morally absolute endorsement to that practice.
Nobody's doing that, and nobody's talking about this.
But
also, they declared war on us.
Do effectively do
Michael,
that because
Michael, you're talking to me. Okay? Right. So if you're not willing to directly answer whether stopping the Nazis was a good or a bad thing, we can move on to other talking points. But this, like, some of the assumptions you're making here are delusional. Like, supporting the intervention means that you're
substantiated by the factual historical record.
Michael, nobody here is claiming that if an intervention was good, that necessarily means that everything the government did leading up to it was good. Nobody's even thinking
state deception in particular. So that, let's say it did happen in World War II. Let's just stipulate that.
You realize they declared war on us, right?
Sorry?
They declared war on us. You realize that, right?
Who did?
Japan and Germany?
Yeah, the whole point of what I'm getting at here is that you...
Oh my God, Michael, that's
U.S.
funny.
intervention into World War II, and maybe you should familiarize yourself with the record. It's pretty illuminating.
Yeah, this is pretty funny.
Was well underway before that, months and months and months, at least before those formal declarations of war. Because as you might be aware, the U.S. doesn't enter warfare strictly by virtue of a declaration of war. Like there was no declaration of war in Vietnam or Korea or Iraq, etc. Right? So a similar thing happened prior to Japan and Germany.
We did a Vietnam.
War in the United States in 1941. And if you're not...
Is Mikey Boy over here pro-Nazi because I feel like he is pro-Nazi?
I feel like he's confused, and I feel like he wants to sell some kind of, I don't know, this... America controls more than it does at all times. And maybe it just makes them feel secure, to be totally honest with you. Like the Michael Tracey's, or like anyone who's basically got this idea that like the Russian invasion of Ukraine was caused by America. And you're like, no, it was done by Russia. That's pretty clear. The America is not directly in control of the Russian military in any way, shape, or form. They actually have autonomy. That's where the danger in all this comes from. They actually have autonomy. There's not just America controlling literally every single element of the entire planet. I mean, they do have the most control of any country. That is true. But to just like blame every single thing, does it make you feel safer at night? Is it kind of just one of those like, ooh, gives me the warm feelies?
Not familiar with that record. I'm happy to share the materials with you.
Michael,
you'll probably find it interesting.
Just say, what did we do? Like, we sold weapons? We're allowed to do that. That's not war.
I'll tell you a couple. I mean, I'll tell you a couple things we did. And here's a thing that we did that led none of this is fringe. This is what's so amazing about it. And what's so amazing why it's so omitted from the population.
None of this is fringe. You're not really selling that one. You're making it seem way more fringe when you say it like that. Like, well, now I think it's super fringe. Like, this is fringy as fuck, dude.
The consciousness. The military affairs editor of the New York Times, okay, in September 1941, so well before Pearl Harbor, he said that the United States entered the European War in July of 1941. So
what
about
did we
6
do?
months before Pearl Harbor. I'll tell you right now. Franklin Roosevelt secretly ordered the U.S. military occupation of Iceland and sending a expeditionary convoy into a German war zone. That military occupation, and I'm not even being a pejorative, using a pejorative to call it a military occupation. That's what the U.S. Navy classifies it as in its.
Like, he's going down the road. I know what conspiracy theories he's about to start poking into. I'm going to guarantee you, like, the United States changing or embargoing oil or oil production from Japan, or doing sanctions on Japan, and I'm talking about Imperial Japan, by the way, is what led to the Japanese attacking the United States. So it was technically the United States' fault. And you're like, again, no. You can say one part is a provocation, or you can say one element of that is certainly them trying to use imperialism to control another country in one way or another, or dominate it or subjugate another country in one way or another. But that doesn't change the fact that the Japanese still bombed Pearl Harbor. Like, that's an attack. You know, it's very weird to start viewing the world through that lens, where like everything America does is controlling everything else to get what it wants.
Pursuant to that occupation and pursuant to Lend-Lease, which had already been enacted in March, Roosevelt
how is that war?
initiated naval warfare against Germany, thus bringing the U.S. into active combat with Germany for the first time. And again, this was well before the formal declarations of war that came in December.
First of all, how was that first one war? We have the right to move our troops over?
Well, I mean, the United States had never, in its entire history, sent U.S. military forces.
How is that? Wait, how is that joining the war? We wanted to protect shipping lanes.
Okay, so if a U.S. Navy vessel initiates an attack on an enemy navy,
so Iceland cooperated with us.
No, they didn't. Actually, they didn't. The British had initially.
I also love people who refuse to ever like want to see a source or see something online, or just flat out will say, "Oh, it's on Wikipedia. It's not real," because it's like, okay, so can you dispute the source that's been cited? Because I think of Wikipedia way more as just like a source collection, as in it's just going to have a whole bunch of sources. Now, it can be trying to push a narrative, perhaps. It's definitely edited by a smaller amount of people versus the amount of people who use it. Like, that's not even close. But like, are you going to really just throw this one out? Can you address it first?
They occupied Iceland.
Yes,
and the U.S.
and then
for the British, and it was done under protest.
Yeah, I guess I
and then once the U.S.
this.
got in, it's true that Iceland, sort of reconciled itself to the occupation, but it was not endorsed by Iceland ever.
Moving some troops over to Iceland with the cooperation of Iceland. Wait, Michael, as is your goal, Michael, we are 50 points away from the main point, and as I expected, like, this is a nothing burger. Moving troops to a neutral island is not beginning the war, and even if this was the case, this has nothing to do with intervention to stop the Nazis. Michael, I am unwilling. Wait, Michael. You already, if you can't answer basic yes/no questions, and everything is going to be this infinite fractal tree where you try to convince me that intervention was implicitly bad by misrepresenting history, why don't we talk about the modern day? If we are incapable of engaging in sort of associated discourse, then let's talk directly. Do you think Russia should have invaded Ukraine?
You brought up something. I have to just quickly finish the point. You may not be aware of the historical record, which
I'm aware of everything.
Okay, are you aware then that on the order of Franklin Roosevelt, starting in September of 1941 into October, 3 incidents of naval warfare were initiated by the United States against Germany in the waters around Iceland, where Roosevelt had sent secretly a military occupation force, thus initiating active warfare.
You mean in the waters of Iceland, where German vessels were trespassing?
Well, whether they were of course they were trespassing. It was an active war zone. That's the whole point.
Okay, so no, it's not us initiating when they go over to a neutral country. And no, Michael, I'm not interested in this World War II revisionism.
Initiates an attack against Ship 2. If Ship 1 is part of a navy that goes halfway around the world and then initiates an attack on Ship 2, that's
they didn't go halfway around the world. It was Iceland that cooperated with us. Iceland was a neutral country. We had troops stationed there.
How far is it from New York to Iceland?
Michael, we had permission to be there. They entered Iceland's waters.
No,
it seems like a skill issue. They should have
there was
not
no
done that.
permission to be,
This is,
there. I mean,
I don't understand what the purpose of this revisionism is outside of Nazi apologia. Here, let's move to the current day. We're racing ahead.
People toss around when they can't reckon with the actual record.
We're racing ahead 80 years. We're racing ahead 80 years, okay? So Russia invades Ukraine. I think it's bad that they did.
How did Michael Tracey think this was like a good idea? This was his idea. He proposed to do this. Like, I feel like people are going to accuse this of being low-hanging fruit at a certain point. It's like, Michael, this is ridiculous.
Did that.
The very first thing, look up the tweet yourself, February 24th, or maybe it was February 25th, early in the morning. The absolute very first thing I said when the invasion was launched by Russia on February 24th was, and this was sincere, this wasn't me just like covering my bases or something, because I actually am, on principle, there's never been an instance that has caused me to question this principle is accurate, the launching of aggressive war. And so the very first thing I said when the war was launched was, and I don't usually do like a moralizing tone, but I made an exception here, and I did it in moral terms.
Okay. So I'm glad we agree.
I've never supported the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The very first comment I made about it once it was launched was a moral condemnation.
I'm glad we agree on that. So because we oppose the invasion of Ukraine, we're both happy that Ukraine is able to defend itself, right?
Well, there's the leap that doesn't follow from being morally condemnatory of an aggressive invasion and then think, oh yeah, by the way, the U.S. ought to...
What is your prescription, sir? Because at the end of the day, are you like, no, they should probably wither and die? Yeah, that's just, I don't know. It's history. This isn't even fringe. I don't see why you're making such a big deal about this.
And about, at this point, $70 billion worth of what they call aid to Ukraine, which is, basically just subsidizing their entire military.
Yeah, but it got really funny saying
ever greater caliber of weaponry.
You can make it sound scary if you want. We're fully in favor.
It's been actually pretty fucking hilarious.
It's in every sense good for the U.S. to operationally coordinate the entire war effort. That's somehow just good.
Like, it's kind of cathartic just because, like, Michael Tracey is just, like, such an insufferable douchebag. Like, the worst kind. And it never stops. Like, just constantly, you're like, oh, he's a professional bad take factory. And, like, he would be more of just a fucking hilarious, memeable person because he does do things that are just utterly absurd, like going to college campuses with a fucking little suitcase briefcase that opens up to have a weird PA system so you can fucking hassle the children. Like, that's super weird. And then you get rolled. He got so rolled by all them kids. It was fucking brilliant to see. I was like, oh man, the kids are all right. They're just fucking destroying him. And he's like, you don't understand. I'm trying to help you. Like, what are you doing? And when everyone made fun of him, Glenn Greenwald comes along and is like, I'm going to stick up for my friend, Michael Tracey. Why are you all obsessed with his sex life? I can guarantee you and tell you that he does in fact have a sexual partner. It is very weird for you to obsess with his sex life and say that he is a virgin who is like patrolling the school. And it's like, oh my God, this is all so funny. So that stuff is amazing. But, a lot of the other stuff, I'm just like, oh God. Every time I see a Michael Tracey take, someone shows me because I've been blocked for so long.
We should have no further thoughts about that except in this binary sense of just saying, oh yeah, good, and then just repeating it over and over. Like,
you can think about it if you want.
Skills.
Michael, you're like Sony or something.
The
Everyone
bots
here
are back.
agrees. Thank you for agreeing with us. Yes, the United States is the most powerful country to have ever existed.
Well, yeah,
and with our help, Ukraine will stand.
Monkey version of just saying good to a complex set of policy issues.
Well,
then
wait, you're the one who facetiously started doing a silly voice and making fun of my positions.
I've done that. I apologize. I get worked up.
So yes, I think it's good. Okay, so let's try. Maybe we can work from basic complexity. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So if Russia invaded, and it's bad that they invaded, it must necessarily stand that it would be good if they wouldn't have invaded, right? Because if the invading is bad.
Why is Salty C-Word so mad? Because it's... Okay, so that was the second part about Salty C-Word I never told you all. Salty C-Word is like a 20k Andy, bigger streamer than Vaush, bigger streamer than Destiny. Actually, I think combined. And it's just like a huge anti-Semite, fucking horrifyingly horrible person, blah, blah, blah. And also, if you do videos on him, his salty army comes after you, and they just like mass downvote the video, mass flood the comments with just all obviously the nastiest stuff, and they just do this like giant wave of attack. And it's why a lot of people don't do videos on him, know who he is, talk about him. It provides a lot of like extra cover and insulates him more to be more super racist and anti-Semitic and stuff like that, because no one likes to deal with it. Because yeah, he goes on the attack.
Not invading must be the preferable, right? So if that's what you want, the outcome of not invading is one in which Russia maintained its pre-invasion borders and Ukraine maintained its pre-invasion borders. So the other way we can get that now that the invasion actually has happened is with overwhelming firepower, which thankfully we have the money and the means to send Ukraine. And thanks to us, they seem to be able to do it. Given enough time, it genuinely seems like Ukraine will be able to restore its pre-2014 borders before the annexation of Crimea, which is good. Because we both disagree with the Russian invasion, we must agree with the Russian invasion.
I would like to think that. That's very wishful thinking, but I don't know. Like, Putin seems to have way more resolve to getting what he wants than accepting what is rational at times. Like, it would make a lot more sense at this point. Everything's shifted around. The oligarchs have become much richer. The cost of oil is so expensive. You're the pariah of the world. The very few countries are siding with you. Very few. So clearly, like, did you see the UN vote that just took place? It was like Nicaragua, Poland, and like somewhere else. Anyways, I would assume you would be like, all right, so now we should probably just keep Crimea or something, or maybe the annexation thing. I don't know. Let's just end this thing. But it's like, nah, gotta save face. Gotta keep going.
Losing, especially.
Sorry, not Poland.
Since Ukraine actually has the means of bringing this about, no?
Well, but you nicely articulated a common understanding of how to interpret the situation. So what'll happen is most people who are, other than the genuinely pro-Russia partisans out there, which obviously exist. I'm always called a pro-Russian partisan or a Putin apologist or whatever, every name under the sun to that effect. I guess, my having condemned in moral terms the initiation of the invasion doesn't.
Yeah, sorry. I misspoke. I'm trying to find them. Oh, Belarus, North Korea, Nicaragua, Russia, and Syria. That's it. Like, that's if that's the axis or whatever in like a world scale, that's not exactly going to be comparable. I'll just say that in the kindest possible terms with what like a NATO alliance would be, which would be very big. And obviously China and India would probably abstain or stay out of it for as long as they could, because that would be the most probably beneficial position for them to be in. But like Belarus, Nicaragua, Russia, Syria, and the Democratic Peoples of North Korea, like a lot of those are countries that have been ravaged by colonial powers, like America, and for one way or another are unfortunately quite weakened. So like, again, this isn't, that's why I'm saying like a rational mind at this point, or at least a rational council, or does he just surround himself with too many yes men? I would assume like the Politburo has at least one or two people who can be like, just looking at the numbers, it's a game of math. I know you're prepared to send every last Russian in to solve this, but just looking at the math, it's not good. It's not good. Like America alone has the largest army in the world by like an expenditure rate of 10-to-1 kind of shit. So like, not good. The numbers aren't great, and so maybe we should take a little victory in that little piece we carved out in the side, or maybe Crimea. I don't know. I feel like we should pull out.
Save me from that accusation in any way. So what are you going to do? But anybody who like basically just follows a sort of simple moral instinct and expresses opposition to the moral justifiability of Russia having launched the war. What is your position? Hold on, I'm explaining it. That's then fallaciously kind of leveraged to say, okay, therefore, because you have an initial moral opposition to the launching of the war itself, that means you're somehow kind of eternally obligated to support every pro-war or pro-intervention measure that the United States, NATO, or whomever decides to launch. And that's not a logical leap that I would contend is at all adequately founded on any kind of basis of logic.
It is just a war between Russia and Ukraine. Supplying arms to one side in a war is not the same as joining that war. If that was the case, then nations have been supplying weapons to allied nations for literally as long as countries.
Oh, the United States is like the world's biggest arms dealer. Like, if that was the prelude to war, the U.S. is going to have to go to war with, like, half the world.
Existed. And before the idea of the modern state. This goes back to, like, imperial days. So the idea that supplying arms to an ally is some kind of faux pas just doesn't make sense to me. If we do not support Russia's war effort, we should support Ukraine's.
Wait, okay, so I don't know if you're aware of this or if you saw this news item. Now, of course, a lot of people speculated that it seemed likely that there were U.S. special forces on the ground in Ukraine.
I've seen no
you know, a
evidence
lot
of
of
this at
rumors.
all.
Sorry?
I've seen zero evidence that there are any U.S. soldiers in
Well,
Ukraine.
let me give you all the evidence you need because this was reported in the
Wait,
Intercept just last week.
In combat. Wait, hold on.
Hold on.
In combat.
Let me just finish. Let me just finish. The Intercept reported last week that Joe Biden had issued what's called a presidential covert action finding to authorize the deployment, yes, of boots on the ground, U.S. military operations inside Ukraine itself physically. Now, we don't have a whole lot of factually verified insight into what they're doing. You can draw inferences because they're engaging in this whole armament provision process.
I feel sometimes that's got to be the scariest moment for some of these people, because it's like the clacking of the keyboard, and then it's like you can hear that sound, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, so I've got the exact article you were just referencing here, and it doesn't say what you think it says. In fact, you really misinterpreted this one, and it's like, no, just trust me.
And we know that the U.S. actually is operationally coordinating combat action with the Ukraine government. We don't know it's true with exact precision what they're actually doing, but we do know that they're probably wearing boots. That's probably fair to say, and they're probably walking on the ground rather than levitating in slippers. So there are U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine.
Did you see that look? There it is. That's the scanning as quickly as I can to see what he's referencing, looking down the page, scrolling, and nope, he did not get this one right at all.
Curious what you make of that in terms of whether the U.S. is involved in the war.
Wait. Of course we're involved in the war. We've been supplying them arms and coordinating movements with them. However, that is not the same as direct military participation. Many countries are involved in this war.
So operationally coordinating combat missions is different from direct participation in what sense? Just because it's not like a formal deployment of
Does this go both ways? Does he think that North Korea is currently at war with the United States directly in direct conflict because North Korea is funneling weapons to Russia, which is then using the weapons on Ukrainians, which then the Americans are arming. So by 6 degrees of separation, that means that they declared war on us, because that's how this works.
Entire
if the sharing of resources and information entailed actively declaring war, then every war ever would be a total world war. You realize that, right? Syria would have been World War III.
You realize that people make the exact same argument about the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. I'm not doing whataboutism. I'm just saying that the reason why that U.S. intervention in that war escalated in the way it did was because the initial deployment of U.S. military forces was not cast as an official war deployment, right? There was no declaration of war.
Michael,
and that's a similar trick to try to pull today.
Michael,
yeah,
the sharing of resources and intel is not the same as direct military conflict. If it was, then Syria would have been World War III. Every country, every conflict, there are different nations involved, in 50 conflicts around the world. Every country would have belligerent lists that would run down the entire length of a Wikipedia scroll bar. Obviously, things aren't treated that way. If you want to pretend that us coordinating intel and offering weapons is direct U.S.
You'd all be calling Fred Hampton a tanky? I wouldn't call Fred Hampton a tanky.
Involvement, then fine. That can be your special definition, and I'll go with it because I'm fine.
Whether you want to call it direct involvement or operational coordination of Ukraine's war,
then I'm fine. I'm pro those things.
It's not the same. That's sort of that would be a ridiculous oversimplification.
Also, I'm looking at the article that you referenced, and what is this? Secret U.S. ops in Ukraine are being conducted under a presidential covert action finding. Current and former officials said. This Intercept article doesn't cite any specific officials. They just say current and former officials. What am I supposed to make of it?
Is not reliable in its reporting.
It varies. Also, why would they not cite anything here? They're just saying people say.
It's very sensitive information. So, under those narrow circumstances, oftentimes journalists conclude that it's justified to use anonymous sources.
Yeah, I actually am going to say that I'm going to doubt the Intercept.
But in narrow cases like this,
I don't fully agree with this. I don't know if you can simply discount the Intercept as not being of high journalistic standards. Ken Klippenstein writes for the Intercept. The guy, he's amongst journalists working today whom I'm respect the most, to be totally honest with you.
There can be a justification for it.
Okay, well, in this case, I'm going to say that I won't believe it until more credible info backs it up. A former CIA officer told The Intercept that Biden's use of the pre-existing finding had frustrated some intelligence officers who believe the
Fred Hampton is leagues more based than a tanky.
I agree, worshipper of the Olympians. Thank you for the $5.
U.S. involvement should be. There's I could have typed this.
So you think the Intercept is just so journalistically delinquent that they would have, some just random guy on the internet would have sent them something and they would just print it without even doing any kind of checking or corroboration?
I've had huge disagreements with the Intercept before.
Tracey strikes me as a contrarian with no particular case for what he's against at any given point. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't call Michael Tracey a tanky. I think Michael Tracey is one of those disaffected liberals who thinks the left has just gone too far, and that's a useful position for him to be an authority for people and a useful pawn for people on the right. That's basically it.
Yeah, I don't trust them that much.
On factual issues, meaning like you accuse them of fraudulent reporting?
I didn't say fraudulent reporting. I said I disagree with their reporting. They might
False
have.
reporting?
I don't understand why what I'm saying is so difficult for you to understand. I don't fully trust them.
You're saying the factual reporting is not credible enough to go
Yes,
up. So
I doubt their full credibility. I need more evidence before, like, I'll just believe some crazy shit.
But the problem is, it's being strenuously concealed. I mean, that's part of the point.
Okay, it's very special top secret
of this U.S. war operation, if you want to call it direct involvement or operational coordination or what have you. One of the problems with it, at least so far as I've seen, is an extreme lack of transparency or at least actual imposition of secrecy.
So again, since you're so good at moving away from the point at hand here,
what's the point
I think it's good that Ukraine can defend itself against a bad invasion.
Even if it requires, like, say, U.S. state deception to achieve
allies aiding them. Yes, I like it when allies work together. It's like a power of friendship animated.
It involves some state deception on the part of the U.S.
What deception? Wait, first of all, I want to be clear because you're very selectively weaponizing this. Literally all international discourse between nations involves degrees of secrecy for national security reasons. This has always been the case and always will. Under capitalism, under capitalism, socialism, feudalism, nations are always going to have stuff that's deemed top secret. It's just the way that stuff like this works. Military operations, whether they're
Biden authorizes military operations in Ukraine. That's just the way it goes because states like to keep secrets.
So wait, please stop getting upset. I'm stating a fact right now. Okay, do you disagree with the fact that all nations require some degree of secrecy when it comes to international and military operations? That is a fact of just any kind of operation.
I mean, only an idiot would disagree that states employ secrecy in the conduct of their military operations or their intelligence.
Okay, so we agree this is a universal factor.
Whether it ought not to be ascertained whether, for example, Joe Biden...
Michael, why can you never just answer a question?
It ought not to be ascertained. It ought not to be ascertained. Man, chef's kiss. That's the best one yet.
Michael, once more, you agree that this is just an inevitable thing that nations do, and that with no exceptions, every nation has engaged in some degree of secrecy when it comes to military, international, geopolitical engagement. There are various reasons for doing so. I'm not saying all of them are good or justified. I support journalistic transparency, but you agree this is a literally ubiquitous thing.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, I'm not an expert on every country in the world.
Michael, you can
the country that's
like
a fuck, that's so slippery. Fuck you.
Keeps you from answering yes/no questions.
I'm going to answer.
Wait, just an answer now, comma, then clarify. Yes or no?
I'm not doing a yes or no thing like
it's a curse.
Okay? I can answer questions without about 3 sentences.
It is a yes/no question. You can, so it is actually possible to get a yes/no answer and then clarify.
What I'm most familiar with, it's true, has often entailed an enormous amount of deceit in its conduct. So yeah, that does appear to be a seeming inevitability of U.S. policy, which is all the more reason why maximum transparency should be striven toward as regards this Ukraine intervention.
Okay, so once more, now that we've acknowledged that there's always some degree of secrecy when it comes to the exact kind of operations we're talking about, we can stop bringing up this secrecy as evidence that it's somehow bad. What we're talking about is the actions itself. Michael, I am uninterested in you like deflecting from every question with like
okay deflecting just because I don't capitulate to your yes
to
or
my
no
questions. Yes, to answering my questions.
2 sentences.
Not capitulating to answering questions is a synonym to deflection.
Yes or no question that for with an answer that's not conducive to literally one word. Yeah, that would be a capitulation.
You can answer with a yes or no and then clarify it for more info. I've done that multiple times. Like, yes, I'm in support of the U.S. providing aid, comma, because X and Y. Like, that's how people talk when they move their mouths. They can say words that add substance to
I don't think most people talk when they're like just talking and they want to like...
People don't answer yes/no questions.
All of a sudden introduce ultimatums where it's like, yes or no, respond yes or no. That's not usually how people talk. At least,
people don't ask yes/no questions and get weirded out when you refuse to answer them?
Like, all of a sudden introduce these like ultimatum style yes or no demands to like remove...
Okay, this is boring me. I'm just talking about language now. I feel like the whole thing is spiraling into like, this is how people talk. Yeah, it was fun for a bit. It always ends up as language games. Well, that's the thing. Like, to be honest, unmoderated debates and debates that aren't in the format of like, you know, college debates or where it's just like, okay, so you're both going to have an allotted like 30 minutes and this section is going to be 4 minutes back and forth. So you can make a list of all the points someone says to be able to address them all and destroy them all or, you know, find points of agreement, whatever, right? But then it's going to be this. But I find with like, and, you know, all internet debates at some point or another get into semantics. If it's just two people yelling at each other, it's kind of like, you know, you get into that thing where it's like, well, what do you mean by this word though? Because it could actually be interpreted a different way. And like, if you think about it, and then it's like, well, now you're just arguing language.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojak, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.